I think God has got a timeline. He's got his own timing too. And I think right through my life, God was at work. He was drawing me to himself. There's this idea that we are the ones who are always chasing after God. But I truly believe that whilst that is true, that we can chase after God, but he chases more after us than we ever will chase after him. And also, I just think I was always in the center of his kind of love and commitment and concern for me.
Hello and welcome to the Follower Podcast, a place for honest conversations about following Jesus to the depths of his heart and the ends of the earth. I'm your host, Matthew Lewis, and I'm so glad that you have joined us. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Follower Podcast. We've been having some really great conversations and getting some great feedback from you guys as you've been listening to them. This week, we keep going with them, and we are going to be talking about prayer in the Christian life. And particularly, we're going to be having a conversation with Nkosinathi Mbuyazi, who heads up 24/7 Prayer South Africa. Nkosinathi, welcome to the Follower Podcast.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for making the time. Really glad that you could be here. Nkosinathi, let's jump straight in. This little audience of people who listen to this podcast, they don't know who you are. Give us a sense of who you are, growing up, coming to faith. Give us an insight into your world.
Hey, as you've said, my name is Nkosinathi Mbuyazi. I was born in northern KZN. I grew up in Duba and another small town called Ulundi. That's where I did all of my schooling. I grew up in a Christian home. From my great-grandfather, he was a pastor and a missionary to his own people. My grandfather was a deacon and an elder in the church. My father is a pastor. And so I grew up going to church, attending church conferences, and just around the Christian ethos. As a child growing up, I think I remember making multiple times making decisions to follow Christ, but then kind of freaking out and not knowing what I needed to do after that. But it wasn't until 1996, as a first year varsity student in Cape Town at the University of Cape Town, that I kind of recommitted my life to the Lord, and my journey kind of started in earnest. I haven't looked back since. I've been growing. I got to get into the right relationships to help me grow as a follower of Christ, and started the journey of even sensing a desire and a call to be in full-time ministry, which then happened in 2000 and kind of manifested in 2003, 2004. I started my journey working for a church full-time here in Cape Town as a campus minister. This was after 3 years of working in the mines as a process controller. After doing my chemical engineering studies at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and so I did a 3-year stint in the workplace, and then started full-time ministry as a campus pastor / campus director for at the time it was His People Campus Ministries. It's now Every Nation Campus. And I did that for a number of years, working with young people. But then I guess that was kind of the entry way for me into ministry. I've done so many different things within ministry. I've been a campus director, pastor. I've been a community pastor for a local congregation. I've led kind of overseen services, or a congregation. I've preached, which I enjoy. I've even been a worship pastor as well during that time. So it's kind of like I've done so many things. But I think the main thing for me is I love serving God, and I love people. So connecting people to their calling and a relationship with God. is what I'm passionate about. And then in 2017, I was, in fact, 2016, I was introduced by a friend of mine to 24/7 prayer. And prayer has been, a very kind of has always been a big part of my life. I think many big decisions for me came out of a time of prayer. I did not always want to be in full-time ministry, but it was during a time of prayer and fasting, personal prayer and fasting, that I, started getting kind of the idea and sensing that God was speaking to me about full-time ministry. And eventually I was convinced that yes, it was God that was speaking to me. So I needed to take that seriously. So prayer has always been key and central in my life. And dating back from things that my mom kind of taught me when I was growing up about prayer, and her making sure that I was also praying. And so when I heard about this movement, they kind of spoke the same language as myself, because for me, I always found that my prayers always led to action, and it wasn't just praying and just leaving it at that. For me, there was always my life had been directed through prayer. So when I met 24/7 prayer, one thing that really excited me was their kind of passion around prayer, not just prayer, but prayer, mission, and justice, and putting all those together. So it just kind of like justice being the heart of God for the world today, and being on a mission that is Christ centered. So our prayers kind of produce kind of Christ centered action, and that action displays and communicates the heart of God to the world around us. And so so I kind of I was very excited about that, and joined 24/7 prayer in 2017. After some chats with the leadership within 24/7, they were kind of keen to launch in South Africa, and were at the time looking for someone to help them do that. And I'd been sensing that my season at the time was coming to an end in terms of what I was involved in at the time. And so I thought this could be something worthwhile. After spending time in prayer for about 3 months, I felt like this was the right thing to do, and joined 24/7 prayer in 2017, and have been with 24/7 prayer since then, leading 24/7 prayer South Africa. And I hope that's a summary enough, not too long.
That's great. What a great story. It reminds me when I worked in the church for a while, and I'm still in ministry. But the Donovan Kutsia, who was kind of headed up the Assemblies of God, and which is part of the churches that I was a part of at the time, he would always say, if you want a job description, get a job.
Yeah.
Because anyone you speak to who's worked in the church world has inevitably done like 100 million things. You were just describing it, preacher here, worship leader there. And you just kind of end up living this life of kind of this eclectic collection of skill sets that you build up over time, which is so interesting. I'm interested in a couple of things that we could pull on there. You spoke about how growing up as a child, Jesus or Christian faith wasn't foreign to you. You made many commitments, but then sort of coming to UCT, University of Cape Town, or no, you were another university, but in Cape Town, you kind of committed with an earnestness that shifted the trajectory of your life. And I think that's a lot of people's story of this kind of there and thereabouts, but somehow it's not sticking. And then maybe there's this moment which really brings us into a deeper conviction. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that. Like, what is that about, And for someone who's listening in now going, yeah, Jesus isn't new to me. I've prayed my prayers and come to the altar and done the things. But at the same time, I don't feel like it's taken traction in my life. What thoughts do you have around that, if any?
Well, I think God has got a timeline. He's got his own timing too. And I think, right through my life, God was at work. He was drawing me to himself. There's this idea that we are the ones who are always chasing after God. But I truly believe that whilst that is true, that we can chase after God, but he chases more after us than we ever will chase after him. And so, and also, I just think I was always in the center of his kind of love and commitment and concern for me. And whilst I might have not been fully awake to a relationship with him, even in the times I was making many commitments, um, I think his concern for me was definitely there. But something that has to do with timing was just right in 2016, sorry, in 1996, as a first year university student. And also just being amongst young people my age who were as passionate, if not more passionate than I'd ever seen in my life, about this, about this Christian living. So it kind of the fire, caught on for me. And I think if there's any difference between what happened to me in 1996 and the times before, that would be it. The people around me, my friends. Yes, my parents were Christians, but their faith was boring to me, because they were much older and I was younger. And a lot of the friends that I had, who were my age as a child growing up, did not have we did not have the exposure to kind of on fire Christianity, and so there was no one really encouraging me to kind of focus and actually earnestly follow Christ until I got to varsity and I was surrounded by students the same age as me and worshiping, eyes shut, hands up in the air, and I was like, what's going on here? I want what they've got.
Right.
And I wondered where they came from, and then I realized that I came from, though I grew up in the church, but the church that I grew up in didn't have as much of a lively focus on young people as some of these young people had in churches where they grew up. And having all those young people in one room meant that I had no chance but to be captured as well in what was going on at the time. Yeah.
I love those thoughts around the timing of God. I always think of Peter in this context. Like you've got this disciple who's with Jesus, but his following of Jesus is very imperfect, very up and down, and very, you've got the moment where he's got the revelation of the Christ, and then on this rock I build my church. And then the next verse is he's get behind me, Satan, and then he's like, I'll never deny you at the meal, but then he's denying Jesus. And then he's on and I take a lot of courage from that, because I feel like I can see myself in Peter a lot of the time, and just the faithfulness of God to work with our journey and all the complexities of that. I think that's a real gift. And then the other thing that you really touch on there, which is so true, is the power and the necessity of community, and how we just don't do this thing alone. There is no such thing as an individual Christian. Would you agree with some of those thoughts there?
I 100% agree. I believe in community. I think one word that I forgot to mention is peer pressure. I think that's probably what kept me away as a child growing up. I just wanted to be cool to my friends, and my friends, when Jesus was not the center of what they are living, and so I was trying my best to be cool. And what's reflective in the many commitments that I made is the guilt that would often arrest me after a while of trying to be cool with my friends, because there was this commitment within that I was not communicating to my friends, but peer pressure. But that speaks of community. Once we are within a community that celebrates the same values as the ones that you are passionate about or that you are hungry for, then all of a sudden you find yourself thriving. So community is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know about you, but as I experienced my life stage shifting, there was a time when I received the gift of those communities that had been cultivated or established for me. And I'm realizing now, as I get a little bit older and have less hair, that some of the responsibility now moves to me to establish those communities for others. It's kind of like
Yes.
this, there's this generational mandate that moves, is that I came into it very young, and uh, just so grateful for the gift of that community that celebrates. And I'm learning now that actually that baton. The other day I was chatting with friends and said, there was a time when something would happen and you would look around the room for the adults, and the adults would be the ones who would resolve whatever was going on.
Yeah.
But now you're
Yeah.
at a stage in life when you look around the room and you are the adults.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And I think there's
Yeah.
something in that around our role in this family of God, around
Mm.
cultivating communities for younger people to come into
Yeah.
and have that same
Yeah.
experience you've described. Your thoughts on
Mm.
that, your experience of that?
That is so true. I mean, we as a family, I've got a 16-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. We found that a lot of what we do now is so centered around creating community for them as the younger people, and I'm so aware of that. Both my wife and I are aware of that because we kind of have those similar stories of growing up as the one that I've just shared, my wife and I, and so we are so um, aware of creating community for them whilst they're young and as early as possible for them, giving them those opportunities we didn't have in our younger age, to the point where we even kind of 2 years ago decided to start visiting other churches to find churches where the kids could connect. It wasn't just about us. Up until that stage 2 years ago, we were actually we were in a process. We were 2.5 years in to a process of planting a church in an area that we were really, really passionate about, and we felt called to that area. But our kids, as they were growing up under, during that season in our lives, we saw them kind of disconnecting as well because they were not really enjoying what we felt so passionate about.
Yeah.
They didn't understand it, and they didn't have friends around them during that time. And so we made the hard decision to say, again, coming back to God's timing, to say, okay, this is something that God has called us to, but maybe its time is not now. Right now is for us
Yeah.
to focus on our kids and try help them with that community around them. And so we started visiting churches, and the church that we are part of now, which is now our home church, we've been there for just over a year. How we knew that it was it was the right place. It was when the kids just immediately connected, and it's also a church that prioritizes young people.
Yeah. 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 And I'm interested in your prayer journey as well. You spoke about, what did you say, your mom or your gran taught you to pray?
My my mom,
Your
my
mom.
mom.
Hey, man, thank
Yeah,
God
yeah,
for moms. Hey, moms.
yeah,
Jeez.
yeah,
Praying
yeah,
moms are like the backbone of the church. What a thing.
yeah.
So she taught you to pray from a young age. But
Yes.
now you're in this place where you're heading up a prayer movement in South Africa.
Hmm.
I'm wondering
Yeah,
about your prayer journey over that time.
yeah.
As you understood prayer growing up in your context as a young boy to now,
Hmm.
what's shifted, what's changed, what's developed, what have you kept, what have you left? Tell us a little bit
Hmm.
about prayer and your journey with it.
Yeah. So I think at the beginning, I used to watch my mom pray, and you know, she she always made sure we prayed every day. At the end of the day, every day we had family prayers, um, and I would pray. I mean, I would pray under duress. That
Mm.
was the beginning of my prayer life.
Yeah, yeah.
It was under duress. I didn't have anything to say to God. In fact, it felt weird speaking kind of into the air in a way,
Yeah,
because you're speaking to a God you can't see.
yeah.
And it was under duress because my mom was, expected me to have something to say, and so I would kind of conjure up some words, one or two words, um, and that would be it. And she just wanted me to say something, and of course, then we would end up with the Lord's Prayer every night. So the Lord's Prayer was also key. I knew it off by heart from a young age. But I would observe her. She would then go on from there to go to her room. Somehow, I can't remember this, memories are foggy. I'm now just tipped over 45. I'm 46.
Hey,
So,
nice. Not looking a day over
so
20, Nkosinathi.
yeah, come on. So my memories are foggy, but I don't know how it would happen. I think I used to make a tea or something, but somehow I would walk into my parents' room, and my mom would always have fallen asleep with her glasses still on and the Bible on her chest, and she would have
Wow.
been praying.
Wow.
And sometimes she would be sleeping and her mouth will still be mumbling something, and she would have drifted off to sleep, in her bed. And I would switch off the lights for her, and I would go to bed. But that picture stayed with me, just my mom falling asleep with the Bible on her chest, still glasses on, and mumbling something sometimes in prayer. They pastored a church that was far from home, so sometimes my dad would go would be away for a week at a time on his own, and sometimes they'll be gone together. So that's how I would have these moments where it was just mom at home. But yeah, so at the beginning it was just praying the Lord's Prayer, and mumbling whatever other one or two words from my own heart, and watching my mom though, watching this lifestyle of prayer. But then and also praying when I was in crisis. She would make sure that when I needed something, especially when I was now in matric, which is today's grade 12, finishing up school, and I was sending out applications to universities and applying for funding for universities, because we didn't have the money to take for me to pay for university studies. I remember her, making sure that I was praying. Before writing every letter I was writing, and before posting it, I was praying, thinking of what my mom, would have told me to do. And how it's transformed over the years. It became more, and right now what I'm actually really, really passionate about is at the beginning, the more I grew in prayer was the more I grew in the amount of words that I would say when I was praying.
Right. Yeah.
And then for me, prayer was just about time spent in just speaking to God, and I really was enjoying that. I remember really enjoying all night prayers, prayer meetings, and all that. But during those times, there was not enough time actually to stop and listen and be in silence and still consider that prayer. A lot of the prayer culture I grew up in was we speak to God, and I don't think we're aware that He also wants to speak to us in prayer.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I started learning, especially when I joined 24/7 prayer. I didn't know that actually there are actually different categories of prayer. I just was doing what came naturally to me, because I was not, also, though I grew up in a Christian home, I was not exposed to different traditions of Christianity.
Yeah.
And 24/7 prayer is a movement that serves different traditions, of churches. And Anglicans, we've got Methodists, we've got Catholics, we've got Pentecostals, we've got Charismatics, we've got also people whom we are serving in how to pray. So all of a sudden I realized, there's actually a whole category of prayer that is contemplative prayer. There's you can be in silence and be praying. You can be, which is something that I really, really love doing, is being in nature, and living in Cape Town affords me that.
Sure.
And I had no category to categorize what happened to me when I go for a run in the forest, but actually you can be in nature, and God speaks to you through nature. And that becomes a beautiful kind of prayer, prayer time for an individual. So my prayer has kind of stretched, and it's more than just words that I throw at God, but it's also God giving God, space to speak to me.
What I'm hearing you say is, tell me if this is what you're saying. When you were younger, beautiful examples. I think that's one thing I really want to not miss, is the power of the example of a lived life of faith.
Yes.
Often
Yes.
I'll sit with people who are parents of young children, and they'll talk about how, and they really want to raise their young people up in the Lord, but they're not sure
Mm.
what to say or what to do. And I think my conviction is often, particularly with young people, but really with all people, the
Yeah.
most powerful and potent witness is the substance of your lived life. I'm sure
Yes.
if I had to ask you what are the lessons your mom taught you about prayer, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell me, but you can remember
Yeah.
that image of her falling asleep in her bed
Yeah.
praying every night. And that's just
Yeah.
powerful. And so I just say to anyone listening, particularly if you have young children, is like live your faith in public, live your faith in the
Mm.
sight of your children. Let them see you loving God,
Yes.
praying, reading
Yes.
your Bible. Those kinds of images when they're young will really mark them and set trajectories. Then
Yeah.
the other thing I'm hearing you say is that your prayer understanding of prayer has expanded over the years. So,
Yeah.
although nothing wrong with your sort of in your younger years, this idea of speaking to God and words and passion, but over the time you've developed more categories to understand what this prayer life is, and almost finding God
Mm.
in places where you hadn't expected to find it before in nature. Would those two things
Yes.
resonate with what you're saying?
Yeah. No, that is so so true. Um, yeah, it's so so powerful. In fact, as we are speaking now, I'm trying to find. Okay, here's a poem I've written about my mom, and just the example in prayer that she's been to me, or she was to me growing up. And by the way, my dream is still to have an opportunity to read this poem with her in the room. I haven't had that yet. So so you could be praying that one of these days I'll be up on stage talking to a large number of people and she'll be there and I'll start with reading this poem.
Beautiful.
Waking up, growing up, seeing my mother praying, begging, inviting, commanding, encouraging, praying. Moving on, trusting God, living in, living out, praying. Darkness, fear, hunger, emptiness, lack, despair, desperation, nothingness, failure, disappointment, always praying. Rising sun, shining sun, setting sun, ending day, tea made, glasses on, Bible open, eyes shut, dreaming, dreaming, my mother praying. Darkness, fear, hunger, emptiness, lack, despair, desperation, nothingness, failure, disappointment, always praying. Rising sun, shining sun, setting sun, ending day, tea made, glasses on, Bible open, eyes shut, dreaming, dreaming, my mother praying.
What I love
It's a
about that
pleasure.
poem is how it stretches prayer over all of life.
Yeah.
I love that.
And it's basically what I witnessed through her. Yeah.
Mm. Which is such a good segue actually into our sort of final thought I'd love to unpack a bit is
Mm.
uh, in the Christian life, prayer is so important.
Mm.
And yet it's the
Yeah.
thing we often get around to last, if at all.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm wondering your thoughts on that. What are we missing as followers of Jesus? Why do we so this beautiful thing you've described that you've seen in your mom that's been so central in your life,
Mm.
why do we tend to, I don't know, put it on the back shelf if we ever get around to it? What's going on there?
Mm. My honest answer is I don't know why we do that really, because when you look at the life of Jesus, Jesus prayed, and he prayed a lot. And the Bible says, I mean, it's written about him that it was customary for him to pray. And if you understand things that are customary to any culture, those things are quite repetitive. Those things are key. Those things are are never to be messed with. They're really part and central of the way of living for that particular culture. So it was customary for Jesus to pray, and then he taught his disciples to pray, thereby teaching us how to pray. And so I don't know really why we minimize prayer so much. I think this is what I often say when I'm asked this question. You know, there's this thing that I've found when I reflect upon my own prayer life, because I've had, if I were to draw prayer for me as in a graph, it would be, it would go up and down like that. There are times where I was really, really praying and then I wasn't praying, and then I was really praying and then I wasn't praying. What would actually cause me to dial down in terms of my prayer life was because, God begins invading your prayers. When you start praying, there comes a time where God begins to invade your prayers, by the Spirit, and start nudging you and speaking to you about things that He would have you do for Him, which is the action that's involved in prayer. And some of it is exciting, but some of it is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I guess we get overwhelmed by some of the God invasion, and then we dial down in prayer. And especially as Christian leaders, I think it's much, much easier and much more secure to have a planned vision and mission for your organization. And when you spend too much time in prayer, then you need to hold your plans quite lightly, and follow the Spirit, and that's hard. That's too uncertain for most people, and so we end up not really prioritizing prayer because of what happens when we pray. So those are my personal thoughts, but it also baffles me, because I feel like we should be prioritizing prayer, because Jesus prioritized prayer, and Jesus is our example.
Yeah. So definitely, I think some of those things, 24/7's got this beautiful phrase that I really enjoy. It says, "Go where your best prayers take you."
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah.
But again, like you say, some of the challenge of that is, hey man, no, sometimes we'll be praying and God, we want to just like put God on silent there. We're like, we didn't hear that. We didn't hear that one, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes your best prayers will
definitely
take you to places you'd rather not go.
You'd rather not go, yeah. But one of the big challenges for us now is, how do we get more and more young people engaging in prayer? Because prayer can be this. When we look at our stats as 24/7 Prayer South Africa on Facebook and on Instagram, we realize that most people that engage with our content are from the ages of 35 up. Instagram is slightly younger. It's kind of like, late 20s to maybe early 40s, but Facebook definitely 35 all the way to 50s. But the thing is, what happens, below 30, and that's where we want to be. That's where we want to try to get people. But I feel like there's so much competing for the attention of those guys, especially in the Western setup. I mean, I think if I was under 30 and I was growing up in New York, I don't know, man. I don't know, with all that buzz and and hustle and just lights and everything. There's just so much that competing for my attention. That's it makes it almost difficult to say, hey, come, let's retreat together. Let's come away from all this, and let's sit in silence for a little bit and pray. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's so many elements to that. I mean, the one thing, I was listening to a Carrie Newhoff podcast actually around this, really interesting, and how social media is generationally segregated. So basically, if you are wanting to hit a younger generation under 30, you've got to go to TikTok because that's where they are. Yeah. So it was so fascinating. The age brackets you were describing are so true to the research that's been done around who is using what. And so for millennials, that's that's Instagram, which is the age you're describing there. And then for anyone older than that, it's pretty much Facebook, which is the generation you're describing there. So if you want the younger generation, you got to hit TikTok, and you got to be there because that's where they are. That's where they're all kind of hanging out together, you know.
And for me, that's stretching for me.
No, totally, dude. I don't have TikTok because I'm just trying to look after my soul with Instagram. You know, it's too much.
You know.
Yeah. And then the other thing I would say, which is interesting, is, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of renewal and energy in particularly the younger generation, Gen Z, around faith. I think that looks different. It's been interesting to see the tone and the nature of that. It's much more raw, stripped down than some of the stuff we would have grown up with. But I do think it's remnant stuff. You know, I think God is building for himself a remnant. And so it might not be the vast majority of young people, but the young people who are on fire. They are like burning, you know. In terms of some of the things you were describing, like contemplative prayer and these kinds of things, I've been wondering just to myself, how much of that is just developmental? So if you think around stage theory and the development of the soul, you know, without being condescending to young people, is a 20-year-old just at a developmental journey? Are they too young to fully enter into some of the contemplative streams? And it's really a question, I don't have an answer for it, but is there something that develops over time where as you get older, you kind of, by virtue of your life, you hit a wall where you need something deeper? And so then it makes sense that typically as you get a little bit older, you start exploring these formational concepts, you know, contemplative prayer and the like. I don't know. Those are just questions I have.
I think you've got a point. You've got a point there. I mean, I guess prayer is like running a marathon. I mean, you don't find young people running long distance, you know, running marathons. The young people tend to do shorter distances, but actually, in terms of their physique and physiology, how their bodies are made up and all that, they'll be great long distance runners, but they just have not developed that endurance yet. And it's really mainly based on interest. They just don't have the interest to be doing that long run, because it can be quite boring. It's quite monotonous. So, and I say that because I am a runner. So people often develop in their 30s to actually begin liking marathon running. But then it's a little bit harder to go as fast as you would go in your 20s, especially in your 40s. So most marathons, the biggest crowd is in their 40s, because that's when you develop the endurance properly. So I guess, it's also developmental when it comes to prayer. I think you are right, definitely.
Yeah.
So then it means it behoves us to then figure out how do we give them those small kind of snippets. I guess that's what TikTok does. Give them the small snippets that grab their attention, you know, as short as their attention span is, but get them to engage, and then
Yeah. And I think this is where 24/7 prayer with your models of prayer rooms is actually so well positioned. The way you set up these creative spaces of prayer that are engaging, and you can move from station to station and pray in different ways. I think that fits really well in the paradigm of a young person who has an attention span of a TikTok reel, because they're able to move and engage in different ways. So I think there's the tools there. It's just, and again, I don't have an answer for it. I don't want to just say, no, contemplative prayer is only for old people. That doesn't feel right to me. But I do feel like maybe there's an angle where we've got to introduce contemplative prayer in a way that connects with young people And how
Yes.
do we do
Yeah.
that? You know, how do we?
Yes,
My
yeah.
friend Charlie Kang, if you're listening to this, he's actually at Waverley
Yeah.
Abbey, part of 24/7 prayer.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've been talking every now and then. We'll have a chat around what it means to decode spiritual formation for a younger generation. You know,
Oh, I love that.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So like, how do we drop
Mm.
the lingo maybe? And maybe they don't need to know
Mm.
about St. Benedict and all these different guys, as wonderful as all
Yes.
that
Yeah.
is. How do we just communicate it in simple English, but still give them the sort of the charism or the spirit of it and help them
Yeah.
enter into that, you know? So and maybe something similarly true with prayer.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think that you're now speaking to, you know, why we need people giving their lives to doing the kind of work that I do, because that's what we always engaged in. In fact, at the moment, we designing an advert that you're going to put out for a youth person for 24/7 Prayer South Africa, because we feel like we need someone full time who can help us have these conversations and figure out how do you put it, decode prayer for young people. It's so key. Yeah.
Amazing. So if you're listening to this, look out for that advert. If that's you and you're burning, this conversation's moving your heart, then just look out for that.
Yes. Yeah. This is where I give you my number and email address. I'm joking. Look out for the advert on our website and social media.
Yes. So that let's land the plane there. Where can people find all the things about 24/7 prayer?
We've got a website. 24-7prayerafrica.com.
Okay.
And there you can find information about us. You can sign up to our newsletter. You can also find us on Instagram. I think we are 24/7 Prayer South Africa, both on Instagram and on Facebook as well.
Yeah.
But if you're struggling, even the 24/7 prayer, just 24/7 prayer on 24/7 prayer on Instagram, then you will eventually find 24/7 prayer SA as well, which is South Africa.
So great.
Yeah.
And you were telling me a little bit about your campaign this year. You want to try and get 50 churches signed up to cover the whole year in prayer. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we asked ourselves at the end of last year, what if we could fill up the whole year with prayer? And the year has got 52 weeks. And so our dream is to get 52 churches signing up for a week of prayer each. And that'll be, each church taking up a week of 24/7 prayer, where you either have a prayer space within your church, or you are doing it online. People are praying from their homes, or maybe as a life group, as a small group within your church, you decide we want to take up a week of prayer, and we've got we will help you as 24/7 prayer with some of the resources. We've created some prayer guides and some prayer themes for you, and you can sign up your prayer week on our website, and it will give you kind of time slots where people can sign up, and you can basically manage it well to know who's praying when, even at 1 a.m. in the morning or at midnight or things like that. But we need 52 churches, individuals, organizations, small groups, life groups of churches taking up a week of prayer, 52 of them taking up a week of prayer. And that would be the whole year covered in prayer, non-stop prayer for South Africa. So that's what we're trusting God for. We've had a fair number of the first few weeks of this year already covered in prayer, but we still need to bed down and a whole lot more for the rest of the year.
Amazing. So if you guys, if that stirs you in your community, get connected and sign up to pray. Nkosinathi, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you making the space to be on the podcast with us.
It's a pleasure, Matthew. It's been good chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And everybody else, we'll see you on the next episode of the Follower Podcast. That's all for this episode of the Follower Podcast. If you found this helpful, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving a review on the podcast. It helps us get these conversations in other people's ears. You can also give a once-off donation or ongoing monthly support to make more conversations like this possible by visiting www.wearefollower.com. Until next time, friends, may you follow Jesus to the depths of his heart and to the ends of the earth.